Good morning, Cascade. I'm so glad that you're joining us this morning. All summer long, we've been taking a closer look at what it means to have faith. Faith is trusting in what you can't see because of what you can see. Sure, we can't see God, but we can choose to have faith in God when we remember the things that He's done, remember how good He is and how much He loves us. We're going to jump right into our story today. It comes to us from the book of Acts, and it's about Paul. We've talked about him a lot this summer. Remember, he tried to stop people from knowing Jesus or believing in Jesus, and then he came to have faith in Jesus. And then he spent the rest of his days telling others about Jesus and helping and encouraging churches along the way. Now, because he was outspoken and because he was telling a lot of people about Jesus and helping churches grow, well, it angered some people who really thought you shouldn't believe in Jesus. And over the course of his years, he was arrested at times, he was beaten, he was run out of town. And as we pick up our story in the book of Acts today, he was in Jerusalem and a mob had tried to get him, and so the Roman soldiers arrested him. Let's see what it says in scripture, because something happened that was really amazing, okay? It's Jesus talking to him. Jesus visits him in prison, and Jesus says, "Be brave. You have told people about me in Jerusalem. You must do the same in Rome." Now, because a group of Jewish leaders were after Paul and tried to kill him, the Roman soldiers decided they were going to transport Paul to another town to stand before the governor there for trial. And when he gets there, Paul tells the governor, "Look, I want to stand trial before Caesar himself." And the governor agrees. And keep in mind, Caesar himself was in Rome, which is where Jesus said he needed to go. So the governor agrees, and he appoints somebody named Julius, who was a Roman commander, to go along with Paul and make sure, to transport him as a prisoner, to make sure he makes it to trial in Rome. So Julius and Paul are in for a long sea voyage, and they find a ship. I think it was probably like a merchant ship. It had grain that it was transporting to Italy, and so they got on board the ship. There were 276 people on board. So the pilot, the owner of the ship, the crew, sailors, and other soldiers and other prisoners too. Maybe there were passengers, I don't know. But they get on board, and as they stopped at one port, Paul warns the owner and the pilot that they need to stay there because it's getting dangerous out on the sea. Like, it's going to be bad weather. But the owner and the pilot, they don't listen to Paul. Nobody listens to Paul. The sailors were very concerned that they got to their next harbor because it was a safer harbor for them to spend the winter in. So they sail on. And then what happens? They get hit by a storm, a really big, massive storm. And it just kept getting worse and worse. They pulled the lifeboat back on board and tied it down. They tied ropes underneath the ship to hold it together in case they hit any rocks if the storm blew them too close to the coastline. And so everybody is just reacting, and it's just a really bad night. And Paul, he goes to bed and he prays, and this is what happens. Listen to this in scripture. The angel said, "Do not be afraid, Paul. You must go on trial in front of Caesar. God has shown his grace by sparing the lives of all those sailing with you." So Paul encourages everyone on board. He tells them that an angel came. He told them to be brave. And by the way, if you'd listened to me in the first place, you wouldn't have to thrown all of your cargo overboard. But look, no one's going to die, and the ship is going to fall apart, but that's okay. In fact, sailors, we need to run the ship up into an island. And the sailors were like, "Are you kidding? That's crazy. That's what we're terrified of, crashing against the rocks." So now it's the 14th night of the storm. Boys and girls, I want you to stop and think about the last windstorm we had here in North Bend and Snoqualmie Valley. And you know how you're just like kind of laying in, why do they always happen at night? You're laying in bed and it just sounds so stormy outside, and it can be a little unsettling. Can you imagine 2 solid weeks of that? Oh my goodness. Well, that's what was going on. Finally, the sailors determined they were near dry land. So the sailors decided they were going to take the lifeboat for themselves and they were going to get off the ship. But Paul goes to the soldiers and to Julius and says, look, these guys have to stay on the ship. And it sounds like he's a little bit of a tattletale, but actually he's remembering what the angel said. The angel said everyone on board was going to be okay. And Paul was concerned for their safety. If the angel said that they would all make it out okay, that no one was going to die, then everyone needed to stick together. And so the Roman soldiers went and they cut the lifeboat loose and let it drift away. Well, now the soldiers had no choice. And they ended up running into a sandbar underneath the water, and it does start to break apart the ship. But that's not the worst part. The soldiers decided, hey, wait a minute, we don't want anybody to escape, any of the prisoners to escape, so they were going to kill all of the prisoners before they swam for safety themselves. But Julius stepped in and he prevented that. So everybody swam to shore, and some probably had to hold on to some of the broken off pieces of the wooden ship, but they all made it to the land safely, all 276 people. So what the angel said about God saving everyone on board was so true. And you'd think that was the end of the story. You'd think that was the end of Paul's troubles, but it's not. So everybody's gathered on the beach. Some of the locals had come down and to help the people that were shipwrecked. And Paul is gathering wood and sticks for the fire. And guess what? A snake bites him. Let's recap what happened, okay? There was the mob that Paul that tried to kill him, and then he was arrested, and then he had to be transported to another town, and then he had to get on a ship. No one listens to him when he says it's dangerous waters. The terrible storm hits. He almost gets killed by the soldiers, and then he gets bit by a snake once he's finally on dry land. What would you do? How would you feel? Because I would feel like everything was happening to me. I would feel so sorry for myself, and I might even feel a little angry with God. Well, Scripture doesn't really say much about how Paul is feeling, which I think is interesting, but I also think he had a lot of confidence that he was going to make it to Rome, right? Because the angel told him, you've got to make it to Rome, and Jesus told him, you have to go to Rome. So I think Paul was pretty confident. He was confident he was going to make it to Rome, because knowing Jesus changes the way you see your problems. It was certainly true for Paul, made everything that he was going through bearable. And it can be true for us too. It doesn't erase the tough situations we're in. It doesn't erase our problems when we go to Jesus in prayer, but it does help things seem not so bad. And when we go to Jesus in prayer, it helps us see things, just like Paul, it helps us see things differently. It changes our perspective. Remember, boys and girls, God is with you. He is near to you when things are good and when things are not so good. But you can always turn to Him. Always. Like I said, it doesn't erase your problems, but it will ease your worries. Now, I'm so excited for you to dive into this week's activities. We have some fun ways for you to have a change of focus or a change of perspective. Real tangible ways. I can't wait to see what you think of those. And right now, we're going to continue in worship with Pastor Tim.